everybody. Welcome to Torn Tuesday, and we start with a message from Sean Astin.
Are events like today important during these strikes?
I honestly think that because it's been going for weeks and weeks and weeks now, this strike, and the turnouts on the picket lines have been amazing. But every now and then, it's nice to remind people who have been walking by themselves in the hot sun that no, you're not alone. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of people who are right there with you. So I think it's just a great boost for our own people, and it sends an unmistakable message both to the industry and to the government at all levels, the local government, the state government, the federal government. There's mediators being talked about, and I think it just sends a powerful message that the labor movement in America is rock solid. And, they only let people know this was happening just a little bit ago, and look at this turnout. So something's happening here, and it's real. As a member of the negotiating committee, I find it very bolstering because you can know what the needs of your people are. But if it doesn't seem like other people are as committed to fighting for them, it makes things harder. So now we know. We published all of our list of proposals, very reasonable list of proposals, and the counters, and so these people are out here with full knowledge of what's at stake and what is happening. Our negotiating committee sends out regular messages to our members. Hey, here's an issue that we hear people talking about. We want you to know what we're thinking about it. So it's an actual conversation. And sometimes in a conversation, people laugh and they get really excited and they get fired up. And this is a moment of fired up for our people.
All right, there is Sean Astin from the negotiating committee commenting on today's strike of solidarity. It is day 112 of the writers' strike, something near and dear to all of our hearts. It's affected Rings of Power in the most negative of ways.
Indeed.
And as we all know, Lord of the Rings is first and foremost a work of writing.
Indeed. Sure is. Right on point, Sean Astin. Isn't it amazing to think about Sean Astin giving that monologue at the end of Two Towers? And now here we are listening to him in a real human perspective in another way. Speaking on behalf of the union. Speaking on behalf of a cause, a purpose that is worth fighting for. It's not lost on me. The poeticism of the situation is not lost on any of us. Justin, thank you for opening the show with that opening clip tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, that sets the stage for our conversation tonight. This is Torn Tuesday. Welcome aboard. This is the one-stop mega location, the biggest and best J.R.R. Tolkien web portal of them all. You are watching theonering.net, and this is our weekly Tuesday chat live stream, welcoming people from around the world, different territories, nations, and cultures, and beautiful free peoples around the world, joining us to talk about the world of J.R.R. Tolkien, as we always do on Torn Tuesday. My name is Clifford Broadway, the writer, producer of that little indie film, Ringer's Lord of the Fans, and I'm accompanied by my extraordinarily graceful and intelligent, and sometimes a little bit willful, we'll have to admit, he's a little bit willful sometimes, but may I welcome my wonderful co-host and producer, Justin Sewell, to the show, and to all of you folks out there on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and everywhere else in the stratosphere, welcome to our live show. How are you all doing today? Good to see you. I see you in the live chat. How you doing, folks? Lovely.
I love to see the chat. Hello from Oz, says Robin. Emma says good morning.
Good morning.
Other people say good evening.
And what exactly do you mean
Jeannie.
by good morning? Is the famous
Well, that's how global this show is.
Exactly.
For some people, it's evening. For some people, it's bedtime. For some people, it's dinner time. For some people, it's morning again. So
just
we're
what precisely
happy.
do you mean by good morning?
Well,
I love that. I
Let's
just
dive into
totally
it, 'cause
love
there's
that.
so much news to talk about this week. But first and foremost, Cliff, happy birthday to Thorn Oakenshield himself, Richard
Yes,
Armitage is
Richard
52
Armitage
years old,
celebrating
looking,
another journey around the sun. Isn't that fantastic? That's well
and
done,
he's
sir.
getting a little
Well
gray
done.
in the sides, kind of like I am. I don't feel so bad anymore.
No,
Richard Armitage,
no,
of course, looking way better
no.
than me, of course.
He's
Uh,
pulling that Doctor Stephen Strange kind of look right now, and I'm really
he
digging it.
is.
He looks good. He looks really good.
Cliff, do
He
you
looks good.
remember talking with him at Comic-Con the first
I
time you
do.
ever got to talk?
I do. I
What
remember
was your
talking.
impression after like 2 years of filming? You finally got to meet Thorin Oakenshield face to face. What was your
Yeah.
first impression talking to him for the first time?
Can I be honest and break a language barrier on my own show? The strongest first impression I got from Mr. Armitage was that he was taking his shit seriously. Really. That's the first big impression I got from him. He was in depth into the narrative, into the subtext, into the obvious themes, into the not so obvious themes. He was clued in, right on point, talking about what Professor Tolkien was telling us from a larger anthropological perspective, a cultural perspective about Tolkien and his presence on the landscape in literature and his contribution to it. He knew more things than I did. During the interview, I didn't know that they were going to really focus more of the third film on Thorin. And as we discussed in previous weeks, a lot of that was to satisfy the challenge of taking language out that was around Bilbo and making the story more about Thorin so that they could also take Harvey Weinstein's name off of the credits. And by removal of that guy's name, they were able to bring Richard Armitage subsequently more into focus as part of the story. We learned more about his dragon sickness. We learned more about what happened to his grandfather and his relatedness to the sins of the father. And then suddenly, The Hobbit, which is not necessarily anything like, it's just an episodic story, an adventure story for children to get an entry point into Middle Earth and to understand who hobbits are and their place in Middle Earth. It is
And
not,
dwarves.
and dwarves, but wait, but with The Hobbit is not really a big sins of the father generational type story. You know what I mean? If you understand, all right? That's the kind of stuff that you look at in There Will Be Blood, or generational movies where sins of the father are passed down. It wasn't really on the pages of The Hobbit to explore how much Thorin Oakenshield felt tied to a strange destiny of his grandfather. Peter Jackson had the advantage of exploring that. And a lot of people say, oh, I want to cut that stuff out. And they do a fan edit, these popular fan edits of The Hobbit. And they're like, let's take it back from the dwarven focus, put it back into the Hobbit focus. And I appreciate that. I understand that. But when I was talking to Mr. Richard Armitage on the red carpet, he was trying to give me the gist of how deep his knowledge was of this narrative and how far it was going back in context. And I was so fascinated by it. But what he was trying not to do, he was really trying not to give too much away to me, that the general tone of the third movie, such as it would become, would really have such a shift in focus. So he was dancing that high wire like any good actor would do on a red carpet, where they're trying to give you some good stuff to talk about, get the fans excited, get the fans to a point of understanding his personal involvement with the narrative. But he didn't want to break like studio boundaries and his contractual boundaries of not giving away too much. And it turned out that the third Hobbit movie really did become, in large part, the story of Thorin Oakenshield more than it became anybody else's. Really.
And it's a
And let's
crime that they did not include the Thorin's funeral in the theatrical cut of the movie.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's a
Yep.
double crime
Yes.
that the funeral itself in the extended editions were given not enough screen time. I feel like there's so much. I feel like we could have spent 20 or 30 minutes in the grief of
Mhm.
Middle Earth and the peoples of Middle Earth, recognizing Thorin Oakenshield, reuniting all the dwarves, the clans of dwarves. And I think
Mhm.
the movie, what Richard Armitage brought to this character, Thorin Oakenshield, has made all future dwarven actors
Mhm.
step up to the bar. He is the bar, and we start to see that in Rings of Power. And we start to see that family dynamic and father and son and legacy and what's, all these themes that were not in the book that were introduced by Peter Jackson. We start to see
Do you
in
know,
Rings of Power.
you
And
have
and
actually
everyone
you've
says
hit on
that's
something. You've really hit on something big there, I think, because so many of the dwarves that the Hobbit trilogy had were comedic, side jokes, side characters, lots of funny comedic bits from talented comedic actors. But Richard Armitage brought a gravitas to what was going on. And you are right, Justin. The direct inheritance of Richard's performance is in the more serious dwarves in Rings of Power that are not at all presented as fat jokes and overeating jokes and I can't run
fart
fast
jokes
enough jokes
and cursing jokes and
or
poop
never
jokes
toss the
and
dwarf or not the beard, and don't tell the elf. And all these dwarf jokes are evaporated out of Rings of Power. And I never
this is
realized that. I never realized that. You're right. It's because of Richard Armitage. You're right.
he
I never
brings an
realized it.
honesty and sincerity and
You're right.
earnestness to the
Yes.
character. He could have played it
Yes.
comedic, but Richard
Yeah.
Armitage treated a dwarven character,
I'll give you that.
as
Yeah.
Shakespeare.
He did.
And
He did.
and every actor
I'll give you that.
that comes into Middle Earth in the future movies and in the TV show, future seasons of the TV show, would be wise to study Richard Armitage and Richard alone. Just watch what Richard does with a dwarven character surrounded by comedic templates as written by Tolkien. But by the end of the trilogy, Thorin Oakenshield is the heart.
Do you know how much
emotional core of this
I appreciate that Professor Tolkien, when he wrote The Hobbit, made Thorin distinct. He always wrote Thorin as a really special dwarf. He even used those specific words to tell the smallest children in the audience that Thorin was different, a special dwarf who was powerful, more mature, more burdened, much more burdened.
Well, let me ask you this:
with something serious.
Durins
it's really great stuff
as well? Are the Durins that special?
Yeah, because they're also burdened with history. Yes, because they're also in that same dynamic, at least in terms of Tolkien's narrative, they are burdened by more important pieces of history than, oh, I want ham chops. Can I have an apple tart? Can you give me more butter with the bread, please? What about more ale?
So the line of Durin,
you know what I mean?
should be as stoic and serious.
Holy cow. For somebody who doesn't have a really in-depth understanding of the books, Justin, you have stumbled upon one of the greater successes in the film universe that Peter Jackson managed to aspire to, and something that he really executed rather well. And it is the distinction of the line of Durin and their historical importance, and how we as an audience regard it in a more serious way than all the other dwarves. Tolkien did it that way. Peter Jackson and Richard Armitage, in concert, actor and director, they did it that way. And I give you an extra gold star today, Justin, for recognizing that. It's excellent. And it does feed into Rings of Power, directly into Rings of Power, and how all that royal family is being seriously delivered with the Sturm and Drang of real drama. It's totally different because of Richard.
Boom. Is this a fair comparison, Cliff? Viggo's Aragorn and his relationship to Elendil in Isildur, that we now see in Rings of Power. Aragorn's relationship to Elendil and Isildur, which are in Rings of Power, is equivalent to Thorin Oakenshield and his relationship with Durin and Durin, who we've seen in Rings of Power.
Let's talk about visual coding and visual representation of iconic characters in this big franchise, right? You're on point. It is clear that Isildur and his father, Elendil, would not be portrayed at all outside of the range of Viggo Mortensen because of the direct impact of Viggo Mortensen's performance over the past 20-odd years. in terms of, programming or the matrix of how you build narrative storytelling for television and to make television work, the audience expects the ancestors of Aragorn to behave like Aragorn. It's all down to that. You're right. It's really right.
So should we start
You're right.
thinking about
You're right.
should the actors
You're
start
right.
thinking about their characters as Durin the third and Durin the fourth in Rings of Power? Should they start considering their performance in line with Richard Armitage?
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
All right. Well, that's
Dan,
not
Dan,
the only
look at that.
birthday this week. Look,
Before we
Richard
go on,
Armitage is 52.
before we go to the next birthday, acknowledgement to Dan Bites in the chat. Rings of Power dwarves more accurate to Tolkien, I think. That's an interesting.
Right.
That's an interesting
And
get for the series. Good point.
John Howe and Alan Lee just had birthdays this weekend. Of course, Saturday and Sunday. They were born 10 years and 1 day apart. Alan Lee, of course, is the older one. They were born 10 years and 1 day apart.
They're just like my mom and my stepdad. Just like my mom and my stepdad. 10 years and 1 day apart.
Party.
It's true.
There they are at our Oscar party. And then here's a photo that Peter Jackson posted from the Hobbit years when they were drawing in 3D. Look at those red and blue drawings. And you can see down at the bottom that Alan has a red pencil in his hand. Wait, so were they really drawing in 3D? Are you telling me that we could get a picture book? Where's Nerd of the Rings? He loves book merch. We could get a 3D red and blue glasses old school picture book illustrated by John Howe and Alan Lee. Why don't we have this already? I need to get Warner Brothers on the horn and figure out how we get this, because there is a picture. There's a picture of red and blue drawings from the hand of John Howe and Alan Lee. I need all their 3D drawings in a picture book. I need this. I need this more than a pop-up book. I need a 3D book. Chat room, would you buy this? Cliff, would you buy a 3D picture book from the hand?
Instantly. Are you kidding? I want to use that meme from Futurama. Take my money. I want to use that meme. Absolutely. And big time happy birthday to John Howe and Alan Lee, Oscar winners, brilliant artists. Their technical ability as artists is non-compare. They're on a different league. They're in the elevated range of artists. And it's amazing. Happy birthday to both of them. Happy birthday.
We already know that their draftsmanship skills are second to none.
Absolutely.
But if they have the additional color depth in their eye and brain to draw left and right images.
Yeah.
Maybe they use the computer and print it out. Maybe they scan a photo. I don't know how they did that, but if they're drawing in red and blue, I absolutely, I'm shocked that this exists, and I really need it. So happy birthday, Richard Armitage.
That's
John
so good.
Howe, and Alan Lee. We've got some breaking news as of this morning. Huge news if you're a gamer and you're in Discord. Let me bring it up. The folks at Lord of the Rings
was big news
Return
today.
to Moria has
Big
announced
news.
a closed beta. And you can go to our Discord. Again, the link is sometimes in the corner. Discord.gg/the One Ring. I'm sure a lot of you who watch the show regularly are already on Discord. If not, I highly suggest signing up and joining the One Ring Discord, because this morning the game folks over at Return to Moria announced a closed beta. The link is in our Discord. They don't want it published on the internet, on Twitter and on public social, so it's in our Discord. Applications close tomorrow, August 23rd at 9 a.m. Pacific. So
what a unique opportunity.
15 hours away.
Yeah,
so
very
sign
unique
up now.
opportunity to sign up.
If you want to be part of the closed beta of the Return to Moria video game and give your input on the quality of the game, how the game feels, the mechanics, Everything we've heard about this game so far is it's a worthy successor to the legacy of Lord of the Rings games, which have had some great big hits.
This is a very cool opportunity. And thank you, Torbis, for saying that it is great to get an introduction to the beta. But don't forget that if you are going to sign up and do that beta testing, please write constructive feedback. Don't join.
They'll have instructions
to just
play.
They'll
have instructions on how to provide that. I don't know if they want feedback. Maybe they're just battle testing the servers. I don't know if it's an online game or not.
I'm
Anyway,
sure they want feedback from users. I'm sure they would like accept the feedback.
We don't know until you sign up. So sign up by tomorrow at 9 a.m. Pacific, 15 hours, 14 and some change actually by now. So sign up within the next 14 hours through the link in the Torn Discord, and you could be part of the Return to Moria closed beta. The other thing to tune in tomorrow is they will have a video preview at Gamescom, which is in Germany, I believe. That is tomorrow morning at 4 a.m. Pacific time. Of course, it's Germany, so it's 1 p.m. It's the middle of the afternoon, local time. So it's 6 a.m. Yeah. Oh, wait, 6 a.m. I'm trying to read this. The stream, which starts at 4 a.m. Pacific. And on Thursday, the 24th, the IGN stream will have another preview on Thursday at 6 a.m. So two previews this week, tomorrow morning and Thursday morning. I'm sure those videos will be archived and you can just wake up and search for it on the VOD. But the big thing is, if you want to be part of the closed beta for Return to Moria, you have to sign up via Discord before tonight, right now, as we speak.
Yep.
So there you go.
And I have to say, that's a really nice opportunity that they're giving to fans to come in on that level and participate like that. That's really nice. That's really cool.
Huge. So speaking of live streams, again, Return to Moria gets a live stream preview Wednesday and Thursday. But big news we just posted on the website.
We're going to build some dwarven halls. We're going to delve too deep. We're going to play that game. It's so exciting to be invited to do that.
And yeah, Bear McCreary and Brian Sibley will be streaming from Oxonmoot live in Oxford with the Tolkien Society. They've announced that the 50th anniversary of Oxonmoot, which I believe coincides with the 50th anniversary of Tolkien's death, which is hosted by the Tolkien Society, will be streaming for free. You just have to sign up for the Tolkien Society, and you can watch in-depth conversations with Bear McCreary, Brian Sibley, and several other wonderful panelists. This one, Bear McCreary, will be next Friday, not this week, next Friday at 8:40 a.m. Pacific time.
So we'll mention it again next week at our next show, of course.
That's right. So, yes. And then, so Bear McCreary and then Brian Sibley will also be all of the whole schedule. There's a whole lot of stuff. If you live in the UK, you should make an effort to go. I know a lot of our friends are. You can, Tea with Tolkien is going. I believe Nerd of the Rings is going. Of course, all the Tolkien Society folks.
Yes.
Tolkien Professor might be there as well. So do check out the post on our website. It's a top post right now at the top of the home page at theonering.net. Oxonmoot to live stream sessions. You can find a link to get tickets if you are close enough to physically go. I highly recommend it because it's amazing. Hello, Torn. Hello from YouTube. Hello, everybody. Any word on War of the Rohirrim? I should have mentioned that. On the birthday note, both John Howe and Alan Lee, who had birthdays this weekend, are involved and have been doing pre-production and watercolor backgrounds for the animated War of the Rohirrim. For the first time ever, Alan Lee's watercolors of Middle Earth will be on screen as beautiful backgrounds to the Japanese animation that will be laid over with animated cells. This is huge, Cliff. I mean, You
It
talk
really
about some
is.
of the most beautiful watercolor artwork ever done in Middle Earth. I think
Indeed.
this War of the Rohirrim might be one of the best looking Middle Earth things ever.
It is something very much to look forward to. A side note of how deeply we appreciate Oxonmoot making so much content available online. It didn't happen all those years ago when I was a guest speaker to do conference in Oxford as part of Oxonmoot. We didn't have the chance to share direct camera live of people doing these amazing talks and conversations. So a tip of the hat and an absolute salute to all the participants, many attendees who are there in person, especially our friend Matt and Caitlin and other friends of ours in the world of Tolkien academia. It's really super cool that they're getting the chance to do that and share these programs live. And even Bear McCreary coming up to share thoughts and his energy and his experiences with Tolkien. It's actually very exciting.
And I
So,
was so disappointed
on top
that
of all that,
because of the strikes, we got no preview of it at Comic Con. San Diego Comic Con was the big convention before the release
yes,
of the movie next April, and I'm shocked that they didn't drop a trailer. I'm so desperate but you know what? Maybe, maybe
but
the hype will grow because we haven't seen anything for
the
Rohirrim yet.
the excitement of having real backgrounds and pure artistry from John Howe and Alan Lee is something. As an animation fan, I'm so glad you mentioned it, Justin. It's a very, very big deal because previous iterations of their artwork have not been seen on screen. They were built into a live set or a digital background or a digital blue screen set, some other virtual space. We haven't seen real John Howe, literal Alan Lee on the screen, iterated as pure art in the 2D format of art. But animation is special, and it gives us this very special abstraction, a layer, if you will. If you permit me to digress for a brief moment, animation is different from live action, especially because it allows us an access point, an entry point into the storytelling because of the abstraction of the animation itself. So we're going to experience, the way that Ralph Bakshi presented The Lord of the Rings is rather different, noticeably, than the way a live action director like Peter Jackson would. Now, going back into animation now for War of the Rohirrim, one of the greatest animation background artists of all time, Nitso Yamamoto, just passed away a few days ago. And he was famous for working, obviously, with Hayao Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli in some of their greatest films. And his backgrounds, pure, deep, and rich watercolors, the type of watercolors that Professor Tolkien would have loved. He would have ravished in the visual gardens and the forests and the background mountains that are a signature of Yamamoto. And his death represents a closure of a big, big, big chapter in Japanese artistry in anime. And now here we are, where we're going to get this anime film of the War of the Rohirrim that combines the great skills of Western artists and Eastern artists, the ones working on the project in Japan and the ones who we have talked about in the show, John Howe and Alan Lee, synthesizing their work. It's going to be such a fascinating synthesis of artistry. I'm excited about the War of the Rohirrim every day. The more Justin and I bring reports about this movie, the War of the Rohirrim, the more excited I am. And I wish a very many blessings and peace to Nitso Yamamoto. He was born in 1953. He worked on Laputa, Castle in the Sky.
But he didn't work on anything Lord of the Rings. The question is, from the chat room,
but
will Ralph
hold on.
or the Hobbit movie get a nod in the Rohirrim? Of course, Bakshi got a nod in Peter Jackson's films. Will the animated film pay tribute in some small way?
We wonder. I mean, the tributes were paid when Peter Jackson did a lot of visual motifs and a lot of tip of the hat to Ralph Bakshi. All the specific things Peter was doing in live action was something Ralph Bakshi had already done in animated scenes. The sticking of the Hobbit's feet on the table, and when he says "proud feet," and
It's a shot for
excuse
shot
me,
remake.
excuse me
Also,
for
the four
sneezing on
hobbits in the
camera.
log.
And the four hobbits hiding under. Now, here's the connection. Do you want
And
to talk
when
about how?
Aragorn
No,
and
no,
when
no, 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 no.
Strider is introduced, even.
John Howe is on record saying on his interview, the reason why I drew the four hobbits hiding under this extended branch, under this extended tree root system, was not because Professor Tolkien had done it. I drew it because of the strength of Ralph Bakshi's movie. Ralph Bakshi's movie had such a powerful impression. John Howe found himself doing developmental artwork and previs artwork for Peter Jackson that was not inspired by the book. It was inspired by Bakshi's formatting and artistic compositions of this frame, a Nazgul in the back of the frame, this big root system, and in the foreground, the four hobbits hiding under the root system. That was nothing that Professor Tolkien ever mentioned in his book at all. And the reason why Peter Jackson used the image so powerfully was because Ralph Bakshi used it so powerfully in the 1978 film. So you would expect every now and then that War of the Rohirrim might do a tip of its hat, at least do an homage to Ralph's greater work. And I have to just say, it's impressive that there's a synthesis of Eastern and Western artists coming together. It reminds me of the glory days of Rankin and Bass, where some dudes in New York City were working with some dudes in Tokyo, and they worked together in a really interesting, progressively synthesized environment where they worked and collaborated together in magnificent ways. And that's how we got the first Hobbit animated film. Now, War of the Rohirrim is upping expectations. Every time they talk about, oh, we got Alan Lee, we got John Howe working with us, we got the guys from Standalone Complex working with us. Every time they say that, they increase audience expectations, and I appreciate exactly what they're doing. It's a very fine game. It's a fine marketing thread that they're doing, but it's also doing honor. Believe it or not, they really are doing an honor to the legacy of the earliest Tolkien adaptations, which we've ever seen, which were a combination of American and Japanese sensibilities. Say it if you will, the most specific 20th century author writing the most specific Northern European, oh, I'm influenced by Welsh and Anglo-Saxon, and all of Tolkien's really fun and interesting Middle-earth influences being as European and as, Anglo-centric as they may be. The greatest film breakthroughs for us as fans was not a British sensibility. It was an American and Japanese sensibility that was brought together to
Two
fuse
countries that
the
Tolkien
British,
would never
the British
visit in his
sensibility.
life.
He wouldn't.
Tolkien refused to
Funny.
visit America
Or Japan.
and Japan.
Maybe. But how funny that the British sensibility comes out so strong when you put it in the hands of Japanese and American artists, and it's their job to fuse the British, that offhand British sensibility that Tolkien infused into everything. So I find that really fascinating.
Film version
Really.
of Lord of the Rings, Ralph Bakshi's movie, Rankin and Bass, Peter Jackson's Rings of Power Season 1, up to now, every single adaptation has not utilized the English countryside, English crews, English writers, and the English sensibilities in the making of these shows.
You know who did?
Is it because Tolkien's stories were warning about the progress of industrialization, and maybe Tolkien's England is not the England that exists today. Saruman basically won. And
Yes. Yeah, I get that.
So
I get that point. Yeah.
It became more Tolkien-ish to utilize New Zealand, America, and Japan artistry. to communicate what Tolkien envisioned during his lifetime in his home country.
Maybe so. But the Rings of Power Season 2, now having moved into the UK, is the first ever Lord of the Rings adaptation or Tolkien adaptation to be properly filmed in his home soil of England.
With a home crew. They replaced the entire
crew. Yep, the home crew Brits.
Remember,
yep.
folks,
Boom.
they fired everybody, the department heads, everybody that was nominated for any artistry awards on season 1. Everybody was gone. The entire crew was replaced by crew in England.
Do you know that there's an extra layer to that. As much as they're using England now, and we're going to see the Lord of the Rings and Middle Earth in a very, very, very British way, a very English way that we've never seen on camera before. Even Ralph Bakshi filmed live in Spain. He filmed in Spain.
I know. He's filmed
Helm's
in Spain.
Deep. He filmed in Spain. It was a big castle in Spain.
That's what was interesting about hiring J.A. Bayona to direct episode 1 and 2 of Rings of Power. It was a homecoming for Lord of the Rings. The first film adaptation of Lord of the Rings ever was shot in Spain.
Yes.
And the first television series
and ended up being animated. Yep.
Was directed by the Spaniard J.A. Bayona.
How fun is that? Do you want to know what is connected in terms of British filmmaking, trying to capture British soil on camera? Look no further than John Boorman. Because he could not do Lord of the Rings, he switched to the King Arthur legend, and he did Excalibur with a really young Helen Mirren and a baby Liam Neeson, not to mention a baby Sir Patrick Stewart. He never got his Lord of the Rings script approved. United Artists decided, no, we're not going to do that. And they handed it to Ralph. Ralph Bakshi got it instead. In return fire, perhaps to clap back at that situation, John Boorman was determined to do an amazing sword and sorcery on British soil. So he switched and did Excalibur, and that's the movie he did. Now you know.
Speaking of other fantasy shows, Amazon has another huge fantasy show called Wheel of Time.
Yeah, they do.
They've just announced a free screening here in Los Angeles next Wednesday. You can sign up at wheeloftimelascreening.com. And I have to mention that Rings of Power becomes the template. Amazon has set up an entire website announcing that all major releases from Amazon Studios will get free preview screenings in cinemas across the nation and across the world. Similarly to Rings of Power, maybe not as many screenings, but there will be theatrical screenings. They're all free. Popcorn's free. Drink is free. And
How
here
about that?
we have the brand new season 2 of Wheel of Time is getting a screening. I'll bet that they'll show the first and second episode, so 2 hours worth of show. That's what they've done on most of these other screenings. So Wheel of Time season 2, a lot is riding on this. Again, this is season 2 of their second biggest fantasy show, their first being Rings of Power. There was a lot of complicated and reviews of season 1 of Wheel of Time. And the fans want to know, did Amazon listen to the fan feedback? Did Amazon listen to the critical response that was kind of lukewarm on Wheel of Time and make a better season 2? I think a lot of fans here are going to be watching Wheel of Time season 2 to see if Amazon shaped up and improved on their show. Because next September 2nd, the same weekend next year, we should be doing this again for Rings of Power Season 2. So hopefully Amazon's getting better at this television show stuff. But so if you live in LA, sign up right now, wheeloftimelascreening.com. Question from the chat room. Any updates on Henry Cavill's Warhammer project with Amazon? I have not heard anything, but Cliff, have you heard anything on Henry Cavill?
No, I hear a lot of talk about the Netflix producers and the showrunners of The Witcher giving a lot of clapback to Henry because of his decision to go and do Warhammer 40K instead of Witcher.
Well,
I don't mind.
Honestly,
I don't mind that at all.
The producers, writers, and showrunners of The Witcher, have no leg to stand on because they're on
Right.
record saying that they tried to make a show that was not true to
Right.
what fans expected.
Right.
They said a lot of the same things that the Rings of Power showrunners said, which is you
Mm.
have to change things because we have to keep the fans guessing. You can't make a TV show like the super popular book that you licensed in the first place. There are a lot of similar faux
Yeah.
pas in the
Yeah. There are
messaging from the
similar,
writers and showrunners.
a couple of similar Fox Pass. We call it a Fox Pass because we don't know better. Sorry, you're right. Um, the whole thing about Henry and his approach to Warhammer 40K is a boon, a very, very big incentive for Games Workshop, the publisher of Warhammer. This is big for them. They're so excited. They're so excited they started to change their branding on all of their retail stores at shopping malls around the country. Their stores don't say Games Workshop anymore. They're changing it to Warhammer. Literally, that's happening at all their literal
That's
physical
great.
brick and mortar
Do we
retail
know
stores.
if Henry Cavill's show is live action or an animated show?
It's going to be live action from all current and clear indications say that Henry is in this to do a very live action thing. He wanted to walk away from Superman and walk away from The Witcher because of his passion for this project. So do not underestimate Henry. Do not underestimate Henry. That's
He
all
is
I've got to
such
say
a geek.
about that.
You guys remember during the
such a
pandemic
geek.
when he built his own computer?
Oh,
He is
yeah.
a gamer. He is
Yeah.
a geek. And Cliff, do you remember that interview when you interviewed him at Comic-Con before he was Superman? We have. I'm gonna have to pull a clip in a future episode. Maybe I'll find the YouTube link. But
Okay.
I remember you having a conversation before Henry
Oh,
Cavill
yes.
was Henry Cavill. There
Yeah.
you were talking about the power of mythology.
I mean,
And
that red carpet with Henry Cavill and then Thorin Oakenshield with Richard Armitage, that was a bit much that year. It was a bit much. It was like
speaking
I just
of
had to melt.
Amazon
I had to
shows-
melt. These guys
That's
were
right.
melting me. It was great.
It
was really
of
great,
Amazon
though.
shows. Amazon has canceled A League of Their Own and The Peripheral, a big sci-fi show starring
Yes, they did.
Chloe Grace Moretz, I believe her name is. The Peripheral canceled at Amazon despite season 2 renewal. They had renewed the show, but because the writers' strike and the actor strike is happening, the writers had to stop working on season 2, and those writers include Jonathan Nolan, Chris Nolan's brother.
Oh.
Chris
The
Nolan's brother,
the guy behind Westworld. Yes.
Jonathan Nolan, and his wife Lisa Joy. That's
Mhm.
them at the Emmys when they were nominated for Westworld.
Yes.
Westworld is probably one of the greatest high value TV shows and cinematic experiences of the last 10 years, 20 years.
Yeah.
It really is in depth. It respects the source material. It didn't treat its audience like idiots. It is so smart. Every rewatch, you get something new out of Westworld. And of course, Jonathan Nolan helped his brother Christopher Nolan write most of his movies, from Memento and The Dark Knight and
Right.
Inception, and all those movies with all those layers of character development, all those layers of intrigue, all those layers of drama,
Wow.
messing with time. He is a king of writing shows and movies that mess with our audience perception of time.
Yes,
Especially
he is.
with Westworld.
Yes.
Westworld, you don't know what period of time you're watching any scene in. Is it 100 years ago? Is it 50 years ago? Is it 10 years ago? Is it now? Or is it a simulation look into the future of things that could be? Sound familiar? Sound like Galadriel's Mirror?
Yep.
Westworld,
Exactly.
Jonathan Nolan here and Lisa Joy have an overall deal. When HBO canceled Westworld before season 5, before they could complete it, Amazon scooped them up and said, we'll give you an overall deal. This means, folks, The Peripheral is canceled, but they still have an overall deal with Amazon. And folks,
Oh, right.
my dream situation,
I
as
see.
much as I like Payne and McKay,
Here you are.
my dream situation right now is if Amazon still has Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy under contract, and season 3 is about to start for Rings of Power pre-production, can we move the Jonathan Nolan, Mr. Westworld,
and
Mr.
bring him into Middle Earth?
Can we put him in Middle Earth and give him a shot at season 3?
Do you think that's
Cliff,
Jonathan's
I want
box?
your reaction.
I love the idea. I think it's a great idea. But let me ask you, do you think that Jonathan has those instincts? Okay, I'm reminded of the time when I was at an audience Q&A with Terry Gilliam, and he's done Time Bandits and
He's done
the
fantasy and science
big
fiction.
fantasy like the
And-
Brothers Grimm, and of course the Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, and one of my favorites, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. He's done big screen fantasies and adventure movies. I'd asked Terry Gilliam to his face, and you know what? My question to him in the audience ended up on the Criterion collection. It's on the Criterion version. Swear to God, it's there. And I said, do you want to do something big, like a big fantasy IP, similar to like Peter Jackson doing a Rings trilogy? Would you like to walk in those shoes and do something like a big fantasy project like that? And he said, oh God, no, not the way that corporate Hollywood wants it done. I'd like to do it the way that I want it done. And he said some other interesting insights. But he, you got to ask, is Jonathan Nolan?
Jonathan Nolan may not. Well,
Ask him.
here, listen.
Ask him, Jonathan, do you have the instincts for this? As a storyteller, Jonathan Nolan,
Well, let me
do
ask
you have
you,
the instincts for this?
Let me ask you, Cliff. You
It's an
had
honest question.
We both had many conversations with Payne and McKay last year. They are
Yes.
definitely hardcore fans. They are very well read in Tolkien.
Very much
Their
so.
Their
Yes.
bona fides, as far as being a Tolkien fan, are legit.
To their credit,
The question
yes.
I have to you,
Yes.
Cliff, is at this point in time, entering season 3, would you accept a capable storyteller and filmmaker that maybe doesn't hold too much allegiance to being a huge fan, but knows how to tell a good story on screen?
Oof.
Because I want to remind you
No.
that
No.
the writer and showrunner of Andor admitted he's not a big Star Wars fan, and he didn't really have interest in playing with Star Wars. And he went to, when Lucasfilm asked him to do Andor, he said, I'm just going to do it my way. We're not going to have a bunch of unexplained lightsaber battles that look poorer than the movie versions. He just made a good show. And you know what? Andor may be the best Star Wars TV show so far. So, and it's made by a guy who's not a huge fanboy of Star Wars. So, my question to you is, Cliff, are we ready for a capable, experienced filmmaker, showrunner, and writer with numerous awards under his belt
Maybe.
to come in and touch the Middle Earth?
Maybe, but we already have problems with dyed-in-the-wool fans, Patrick McKay and J.D. Payne, who are deeply, deeply identified themselves as hardcore fans. We already have the problem of them going too far astray from what's in the pages of the book. So, no, I'm not jumping at the gun to hire anybody else who is willing to go further astray. If
But
it
they
holds
can get
true.
at the themes. I think
If-
one of the problems that we had with season 1 is it drifts further away from the themes of Tolkien. And every single reviewer has hinted or said that explicitly. The thing about a good showrunner and writer like Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy is that they are smart enough to grab onto the core themes and say, how do we tell that story in themes? And here's how I would pitch it, because we know Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy love to play with different times. Love to play with the concept of time. Well,
Yes.
Cliff, can you explain to me what the big difference is between elves and Numenorians and men and dwarves?
You want to give me a couple hours?
Well, the core theme there is lifespans and time. Elves view time much differently than
Of
the
course,
Numenorians.
because they live for an infinite amount of time while the Earth
Remember when
exists.
Lee Pace
While the
Thranduil
Earth
says,
exists.
"I can wait. I
Yeah,
have time."
yeah, yeah. He's talking
So
about
that's
his
the pitch.
immortality. Yes, yeah.
That's the pitch to Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy. You want to tell a story that messes with time and
Mm,
characters
mm,
and time infinite?
mm.
Lord of the Rings: The Second Age is your story. It's a story about elves and time and Sauron and
You're right.
time.
It's especially true about the elves using the three elven rings to slow down the passage of time.
Oh my
They were
gosh.
trying to. That's why everything in Lothlorien slows down. That's why Peter Jackson
Really?
he sped up the film, and that's why everything in Lothlorien seems in slow motion, because Peter is tapping into the metaphysical concept that the elves, at least the elves using the power of the three in Rivendell, Elrond was using it, and much more so, Galadriel was using her ring in Lothlorien to slow down the progress and the decay of time,
Robin in
which
the chat room
is
says the whole
fascinating.
Numenor
Fascinating.
story is about mortality. Tolkien said this himself.
Yep.
The whole
Yep.
story of
Well,
Numenor
okay.
is
Well, then
about
maybe you're
mortality.
onto something. Maybe you're onto something that
I'm
Jonathan
telling.
Nolan could
I
bring
am.
it, but I would never
Oh,
ask for it. I would never ask for anybody as talented as Jonathan Nolan and his wife. I would not ask his team from Westworld to come on board Middle Earth unless it was to exact a further commitment to Tolkien to make it more true than anything they could
all
possibly
right, all
do.
right. My, you know what? A dream middle ground right now, Cliff, is Jonathan Nolan
Come on,
and Lisa Joy take over
really?
as showrunners, but McKay and Payne stay on as heads of the writers' room to make
Right.
sure that the lore and Tolkien is
Okay.
still there.
Okay.
But I feel like
That could be fun.
look at Jonathan Nolan's IMDb credits for writing.
Yeah.
Look at Memento. Look at The Dark Knight. Look at Inception. All of these movies play with time as a
Yeah.
core narrative strategy. And
Yeah.
Cliff, this is what Sauron's whole thing is in the Second Age. He's has time. He's playing a long game.
Now, I represent Durin the Seventh in the YouTube chat for saying that ROP has already greatly condensed the timeline. Is that really the best place for him? I understand your point, and that is something that season one was guilty of, a crazy over condensation of the timeline in the late Second Age. However, what we're talking about, I believe, is more like how this writer director Jonathan Nolan would approach a thematic construct, a thematic idea of why the elves would be interested in slowing down the progression of time, slowing down decay, slowing down the process of death, putting the idea of aging, deathlessness on stage. That was
We
something
didn't get any of that in season
do you
one.
know what? And that's what I asked him on the train. When I was on the train, on the Amtrak train, getting a ride down to San Diego, and one of the showrunners pulled me aside anonymously and said, "Hey, surprise, it's great to bump into you. Hey, great to bump into you. Wow. What do you want to talk about? Hey, I want to talk about Tolkien saying the thematic idea was about death and the pursuit of deathlessness. Are we going to talk about that in Rings of Power?" And he said, you know what? I think we've got you. Well, that's what he said to me on the train. But in season one, I haven't seen, except for the crisis of the elves now being presented with a tree that is rotting and losing its leaves, with the elves presented with the idea of their timelessness on Middle Earth now suddenly being cut short. Except for that, I did not see much in Rings of Power season one Honestly, I didn't see much at all that reflected on what we're talking about. Maybe Jonathan Nolan, according to this crazy hypothetical cockamamie idea that Justin has, the idea that thematically, once given the power of the rings, three great elven lords would use the power of the rings to slow down time and slow down the ultimate beckoning that they would have to answer the call and go back to Valinor. But they want
Isn't
to
that
delay
what
that.
Inception is? It keeps
Galadriel wants to
slowing
delay
down
that. Yeah.
time.
She wants to slow down. Galadriel wanted to build Lothlorien so that she didn't have to answer the call. So she didn't have to so quickly go back on the boat and go back to Valinor. She wanted to linger in the places of Middle Earth where she could have her own kingdoms and her own dominion and run things the way she wanted to run things on her own terms and have nature preserved, have the progress of decay and decomposition slowed down so much so that the living trees and the living elves all around within the forest would not age and that things would slow down. That's why Peter Jackson did his section of the film that way. Everything is slowed down. It's very noticeable. So we didn't see that yet. Season 2 might be the first opportunity for the Rings of Power on Prime Video to explore that thematic idea more in depth. I would anticipate that. I would hope for that. And if it's not evident, then I'll be even more disappointed. But that's what I want to see. I want to see that.
Final question for you, Cliff, on this topic before we move on. Do you trust, since you've seen Westworld and you've seen Inception and Dark Knight, Memento, do you trust Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy if they expressed interest? Do you trust them?
Yes.
Do it right.
Yes, but not at the expense of ignoring the lore even more than it has been. Just to take that idea out of it, yes. But the answer is maybe, yeah, that'd be cool. It could be cool. But imagine head writers, Patrick McKay and J.D. Payne, working with a fully benched, fully staffed writer's room, a nice big one that's fully staffed and has all the resources and all the time they need, and they could create rich tapestries of stories while Jonathan Nolan and his wife are like, let's steer it more towards what is it like from the existential thoughts of Galadriel? What is it like from the existential thoughts of a timeless being who's now confronted with what they know is time continues to forever pass. And what are these rings going to do? Oh, the weird Sauron back flavor, that weird taste in your mouth that you're feeling, well, that's still Sauron. That's him in those rings trying to get you to do stuff that you're not supposed to do. And Professor Tolkien wrote about the elves and their primary sin. If they did have any sin in the late Third Age, it was that they sinned against what was the inevitable progress of metaphysical change to get them out of Middle-earth and get them over to Valinor, and all things must come to that ultimate conclusion. But they resisted. The elves used the power of the rings to resist.
Rivendell was under a magic spell.
And you can assume that Círdan would have done that as well, except he donated his ring of fire to Gandalf. And Gandalf was not engaged in that spiritual tic-tac-toe of should I or shouldn't I stay in Middle-earth or not, or build my own dominion and run my own kingdom or not. Should I obey the laws of Ilúvatar or not? Right? You see where it's at? So Gandalf was never in that position with the third ring, but Elrond and to a greater degree Galadriel were in that position. And since Tolkien was so interested in thematically exploring that, why wouldn't the TV show? Why wouldn't it be so? Riddle me this, Batman. Why wouldn't the bloody TV show want to explore the same interests that Tolkien wanted to explore? Why wouldn't it? It could only benefit, the show can only benefit and only attract more fans, and attract more fans for the right reasons if it sticks to the thematic core of what I've been talking about for 7 minutes. And I'm sorry to pontificate. Hashtag sorry, not sorry. Back to you in the control room.
All right. Well, look, that's my dream scenario. Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy, their show, The Peripheral, has been canceled by Amazon. They're still under an overall deal. They're still on the payroll of Amazon. You know, if you want to soft walk into this, they just finished filming season 2. There's another year of post-production and effects work and scoring to be done.
That's a lot of post.
Maybe Amazon can ask Jonathan Nolan to come in, review the edit, make some notes, offer some constructive talk. His resume speaks for itself. Jonathan Nolan is known for quality storytelling above all else, above great looking movies, above great cinematography or visual effects or big stars. Jonathan Nolan and Westworld had huge stars, but they got lost in their characters. And when you watch Westworld, you're immediately in. And let's not forget, Jonathan Nolan worked with King Durin himself in Westworld. The father of the guy that buys Westworld in the show, the old man, is King Durin, Old Man Durin.
That's him. Yes. Yes, it is. You're right.
So there are some crossovers here. So Amazon, if you're watching this show, I don't know if you still watch anymore. This is my dream scenario. Ask Jonathan Nolan to come take a look at the edit. Maybe it whets his appetite. Maybe give him some books to read. Cliff, are there specific books that Jonathan could read that discuss in particular the passages of time and the differences in
the
time?
Letters, the Professor Tolkien's letters? You have to be intimately familiar with Professor Tolkien himself, and the best way to do that is to read it in his own words. You have to read Tolkien's letters, and you have to obviously read that Brian's. Yeah, there is a new edition. Thank you for reminding the audience as well. But you really need to dig into Brian Sibley's *The Fall of Numenor* and read that alongside the regular appendices that you're reading and the Silmarillion as well.
I'm going to keep thinking about this in an excited tone because there is no other showrunner and no other writer that is more suited, based on what Cliff has told me about the stories of the Second Age and what the conflict is in the Second Age. The core conflict, not just the battles and not just the one-on-ones. The core conflict is passage of time. And there's no better storyteller alive today.
And the pursuit of deathlessness. You know,
operates on that.
It is. You're right. Nolan. It is the Numenorians' obsession. The Numenorians obsess over the passage of time and deathlessness. And the fact that the elves have a different fate than they do as mortal men. And they can't stand it. By the time Sauron gets under their skin, it becomes an obsession. The Numenorians destroy themselves because of their obsession with being immortal. The elves bring themselves to the brink of metaphysical failure by using rings of power to prolong time and to escape death and decay and to prolong deathlessness. The elves are the men of Numenor, all these big races of Middle-earth that are biggest on stage in the late Second Age are actually thematically struggling with all of this. And so far, the only visible mention of it in season 1 that I've seen so far is black, sticky tar coming out of a tree that is rotting and losing its leaves. Otherwise, I have not seen much of a thematic consideration such as this in season 1 of Rings of Power.
This is what I like about Lisa Joy and Jonathan Nolan. They do not talk down to their audience. They assume that their audience is smart enough to keep up with the most confusing scientific sci-fi type things going on. And again, when you watch Westworld, you can watch it 10 times and still not figure out what time frame each scene is in. He's so good at this, and this is what the show needs. Not and if it's a choice between bringing in J.J. Abrams for some help and Jonathan Nolan, I think for Tolkien to be truer to Tolkien, you want the advice of Jonathan Nolan. All right, let's move on to
Excellent.
the big news of last week. Embracer, the new owners of Lord of the Rings as of August last year, announced that Lord of the Rings licensing revenue drove most of the quarterly growth at Embracer. This is the first full quarter, financial quarter. Again, there's publicly traded company there in Sweden. Embracer is a Swedish company, but they do live stream their quarterly reports as most big companies do. So they announced Lord of the Rings. Most of that, of course, is from the release of the Gollum game and Magic the Gathering, which some estimates have pegged the licensing fees because of the sales of Magic the Gathering, Lord of the Rings cards. Embracer is expected to get between $10 and $15 million in licensing fees just from the actual sales on launch day. So,
my goodness,
huge. Lord of the Rings is the biggest release in Magic the Gathering's history, both from number of packs sold and the amount of money brought in. Lord of the Rings is the biggest in Magic the Gathering's history, and so that is huge.
It is amazing. Today on the phone, I just got an alert from one of my strongest champion level Magic the Gathering friends who plays champion level. And he sent me a message and said, you better look through that deck of cards you have for the orc archers and take them all out because they're selling online for $50 a piece. Each card is worth $50 because they're that powerful in the game. And they're that good.
There's orcish, I think it's orcish archers.
Orcish archers. Yep, orcish archers. That's the one.
And there's a bunch of cards doing well, and you can still find. Not all of the One Rings have been found, and some of them are still worth upwards of $10,000.
Hold on, not the One Rings. You mean there's other elven, dwarven, and mortal rings?
Yeah, they're called soul rings, but they're
called
the
soul
One
rings.
They all look like the One Ring. It's the One Ring, just whatever. Other news in Embracer. There was a lot of questions about Embracer announcing a big deal that fell through, and people thought, oh, did Amazon fall through? Was it a deal with Microsoft? Turns out Saudi Arabia invested $1 billion. This is June 8th, 2022. So last year, June, Saudi Arabia invested $1 billion in Embracer Group. In August, Embracer Group made the purchase for Middle-earth Enterprises. So Saudi Arabia gave them $1 billion, and they spent probably 40% of it, 50% of it on Middle-earth Enterprises 2 months later.
Wow.
There's an easy line to say between June of last year and August of last year, Embracer got this investment with Saudi Arabia, $1 billion cash, and then they paid cash for Middle-earth Enterprises. So it was interesting to find out last week that the same Saudi Arabian company canceled a $2 billion deal with Embracer.
Really?
Embracer had worked on this for many, many months. They had deal memos signed. The contracts were in place. All the lawyers had looked over everything. Basically, Embracer was going to receive like $500 million a year for 4 years or something like that. So it was basically the cost. It was going to keep people employed and keep people making games, and potentially allow more Middle-earth games to go into production. But the Saudis backed out of the deal the day before it was supposed to be announced, and that was the big deal. And if we scroll down here, Axios is a good website for that follows gaming news, business news. Um, Axios learned of Savvy's involvement, that's the Saudi Arabian company, from 4 sources. The $2 billion deal would have involved Savvy investing in the development and publishing of games from Embracer.
Mm-hmm.
Embracer had been promising investors, but as of May 24th, the deal fell through. They say all documentation was finalized and ready to go as of yesterday. We asked for a signature, and they said they wouldn't do it. So that was a big deal a few months ago. So here comes Lord of the Rings to the rescue, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Everything is bad news. They had to lay off a bunch of people. A bunch of games got canceled. The Gollum game developer closed up shop.
Oh,
because it
dear.
didn't make its money back. Yeah, so that $2 billion deal fell through. So basically, Saudi Arabian money allowed the transaction to happen, allowed more Lord of the Rings to get purchased, and now the biggest thing on the bottom line of Embracer is Lord of the Rings, and they're just getting started. We don't know if there's been any payments from Amazon for their new MMORPG game, or Warner Brothers because they got a new movie rights deal. We don't know how much is involved there. So anyway, things are looking up. The shiny Embracer expected Lord of the Rings to be a shining star in their portfolio, and turns out on day one, on their first quarter of operation, it's the number one profit center.
To me, I'm going to say it's the only star in their portfolio. Although that's not correct, but it's what it feels like right now.
The interesting thing, and we'll have to dive deeper into this in a future episode, because I've been doing a little research, doing my own research.
Yes.
Embracer is not making anything themselves, although they make Tomb Raider video games, and they make Dark Horse comics, and they have all these video game developers and studios. With Lord of the Rings, Embracer has decided to sell or license the rights out. So Amazon's making an MMO game. Weta is making an action adventure game. EA has that mobile game, Heroes of Middle-earth. Of course, there was the Gollum game. Magic is making the Magic cards. Oh, but there's a Kickstarter starting next week for the new D&D spin-off, Tales of Middle-earth Moria. I forget what it's called. But there's a D&D, I forget what they call it, rule book. And then, of course, Warner Brothers is making movies. Amazon is making the TV show. And there's a bunch of companies making merch. So Embracer isn't actually making anything. They're just licensing it out, which is an interesting choice, because they could be making stuff, but they're choosing not to.
Yeah, they're just licensing things out like the previous Tolkien Enterprises did. And therefore it becomes their burden, really. It becomes Embracer's burden to make the right kind of deals with the right kind of vendors who are going to do the right kind of work.
Oh, to catch people up, the question in the chat room.
That doesn't sound so gatekeepy, does it?
Who is not a gamer. What is Embracer? Embracer is a Swedish corporation that owns over 250 game developers and game publishers. They're a giant, publicly traded corporation in Sweden
that spent a lot of money to get the rights.
That has spent. Yeah, and you know what? They got a really good deal. They spent the last 5 years buying up a bunch of developers. So Eidos Interactive, whose most famous game is Tomb Raider. They bought Dark Horse Comics. They bought the Middle-earth Enterprises, who owns all the rights to Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. And they've bought 250 other video game developers. So Embracer's core business is making games, paying programmers to develop games, paying artists to design games, and then to publish games. That's their core business. Last year, they decided to buy Lord of the Rings and Tomb Raider and Dark Horse Comics.
Start licensing it to a lot of people.
Start diversifying their portfolio, as the business people like to say. So
Is it to say that the development on Magic the Gathering was done years before the Embracer deal?
Yes.
Okay. And that means the existence of Magic the Gathering, Universes Beyond, with these wonderful Middle-earth cards in Magic the Gathering, was one of the last deals done with Saul Zent's Enterprises. The previous. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
see, Otaku Senpai, I didn't need to do more research because I still don't understand. There's a One Ring supplement is Moria, the Long Dark, but there's a D&D conversion called Moria, the Shadow of Khazad-dûm. I do not know how all of these game overlays, whether it's Magic or D&D or One Ring supplement, I
Right.
don't know all the difference. All I know is they're all tabletop games. They're all played on a table.
Mhm.
Surrounded by friends. That's all I know. And there's a Lord of the Rings component to it. I'm not quite sure. Cliff, you're gonna have to explain it to me one time because we're running out
Oh
of time.
no, I'm not going to explain all that. Are you kidding? I mean, the fact that it took Kristen Thompson much of her professional journalistic life to track down and organize a beautiful, concise book called the Frodo franchise, it's the only thing that can help you unravel the lengthy and complicated world of rights, copyright ownership, intellectual property ownership, and the separation between the legal estate of Tolkien and the academic studies of Tolkien, what the publisher has an interest in versus what the IP license holders have an interest in. What a different, wild labyrinth of a story, and it's all put together in a one-stop volume. Get your hands on it if you've never read it. It even explains how Miramax led on to New Line Cinema, which led on to Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, which was back tied into Universal Artists. It all explains how the rights to Middle-earth landed in the lap of a little indie filmmaker in New Zealand named Peter Jackson. It's an amazing
great book. It's called The Frodo Franchise. Look it up on Amazon.
Otherwise, I would dare not
and,
try to explain it. I would dare not try to explain it, really, honestly.
And then our final news story today, we told you last week that Jeff Bezos' and Amazon's lawyers shut down that Polychron lawsuit. Remember that author that illegally and illicitly tried to copyright a illegal sequel to Lord of the Rings, and then proactively sued Jeff Bezos and the Tolkien estate.
Yes.
Well, the judge said, no go, you're canceled. She said the lawsuit has no merits. Well, over the weekend, the dude's lawyers, this guy must have a ton of extra money because he's losing in court. The dude's lawyers filed another claim. And here we go. And this is the judge's response.
Okay.
She says mere hours after this court determined that Dimitris Polychron's book is an unauthorized work that is not entitled to copyright protection, Polychron baselessly attempts to assert that the estate's claim is the very same copyright infringement is barred by the statute of limitations. The judge says, this argument is remarkable not only for its complete misunderstanding of the law, but also for the fact that it appears to be filed for the sole purpose of creating delay and forcing the Tolkien estate to incur additional expenses. Had defendant conducted even a superficial review of the law, he would have discovered that the estate is well within the statute of limitations, and that his argument does not contain a shred of legal merit. For the reasons discussed, defendant's motion to dismiss should therefore be denied. So it's official.
Wow.
This guy keeps getting shut down by the judge. He keeps filing motions and frivolous lawsuits, so the Tolkien estate keeps spending money on lawyers. The judge is ready to throw him out. It is so stupid, but that's why we did a whole show last week on trolls and what trolls do and how to deal with trolls. And I
Yes.
tell you what, the
So
judge is
funny.
having none of it, and the judge is shutting this troll down. And the
Wow.
quicker he can go away, the better.
Do you know, as we lean back into the humor of the Looney Tunes cartoons, Looney Tunes, Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, who, and I know Daffy's still on your lock screen on your
He's
phone.
Wile E. Coyote. He keeps
You know,
painting a tunnel and
yeah,
running right into the wall.
this guy is Wile E. Coyote. He keeps getting himself into self-effacing disaster after self-effacing disaster over and over again. It's hilarious. But to quote the famous rabbit, what an ultramaroon. That's it.
What a maroon.
Well,
Well,
what an
Cliff, this has been a
ultra-maroon.
huge show. We've had nothing but news and updates on everything. Happy birthday
Good stuff.
to Alan Lee. John Howe, looking forward to your work on War of the Rohirrim. Happy birthday to Richard Armitage.
Yes.
Folks, if I can send a message to the dwarven actors on Rings of Power, please watch carefully what Richard is doing with that character, because you, the line of Durin, are playing his ancestor, and we want to see some of his characterisms embedded into your characters.
It's amazing. It's amazing how Richard Armitage has taken it so far away from what John Rhys Davies did. There's no temperament at all close to nobody tosses a dwarf. Richard Armitage would never freaking say that as Thorin. So it's fascinating. You make a great point. That was really illustrative tonight. And I want to say thank you, Justin, for bringing that very illuminating point into the conversation. Thank you, sir. Nice to rely on you for bringing it together on this wonderful weekly show. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now ready to stop the show and say goodnight and wish everyone a really great evening. But before we do, a little bit of housekeeping, please. A gentle reminder that coming up on Saturday, September 22nd, wait, check your calendars. It might be Saturday, September, what Sunday. Is it? No, it's Saturday, September
We're doing
23rd.
Okay.
It's the 23rd. It's the 23rd. But we're all very familiar with the date of September 22nd being Bilbo and Frodo's birthday. But check it out. We have the live Facebook community event page for the Bilbo Baggins Birthday Bash 2023.
It's free, open to the public. It's a potluck. Cosplay's encouraged.
Come join us.
To dance. Bring your picnic baskets, and your blankets, and your cosplay, and your ukuleles, and
bring your harp. Get ready to dance the Springle Ring with a bunch of Hobbit lads and lasses. It's going to be great fun. We're going to dance the mushroom dance, pin the tail on the dragon, and a lot of other mischief will be had. An all-day potluck extravaganza. Before potato
Saturday,
salad. Bring me potato salad, please. That's what I want.
Saturday, September 23rd. Again, you have tonight on our Discord to sign up for the beta, the private closed beta.
That's right.
Be the first to play the Return to Moria, AAA, maybe a AA, maybe it's a AAA video game. The link is in our Discord. It's in the announcements. It's also in the gaming section of our Discord. You have until 9 a.m. Pacific time tomorrow to sign up for the beta. And then next week, Amazon's doing a screening of Wheel of Time here in Los Angeles. And then next weekend is Dragon Con Atlanta. We have a wonderful set of panels. Green Dragon is going to be there. Jim Wirt's going to be there.
That's exciting.
Some shirts, some of our Sauron shirts, and some other stuff. It's going to be really fun. Evening at Bree, Party Thranduil. We're going to have an amazing time at DragonCon.
Big Labor Day weekend. That's Labor Day weekend right around the corner.
And the same weekend is Oxonmoot in the UK. So you're either a party dwarf and a party elf in Atlanta, or you're a book-loving fan looking for smart, intelligent, scholarly conversation with the Tolkien Society at Oxford. Next weekend is a huge thing.
Very exciting.
Looking forward to it.
Me too. What an exciting time to be a Tolkien nerd. Thank you guys for being part of our journey. You want to follow us on all social media at theonering.net. Take out the dot, and you will find us, The One Ring Net, at Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, doodly. I'm never going to call it X. And be sure to sign up for our Discord. Myself, personally, you're going to find me at QuickBeam2000 on Twitter and Instagram. You wonderful people in the live chat and all you wonderful folks joining us live. You are a blessing to all of us. Thank you for being part of the fabric of our community. And to all the attendees at Oxonmoot who are out there, thank you for being Oxonmoot, because you are. It's fantastic. What a great time.
We have some big Green Dragon gossip next week.
So
make sure you tune
blowing
in.
you out.
You're not
next
gonna,
week. Next week.
You won't
Oh,
believe.
gosh.
It's great news.
I know how bad it's going to get. The anticipation,
What
ladies
is
and
Discord?
gentlemen.
Discord is a chat. Is our new chat room. It's kind of like IRC. If you're old enough to remember our IRC Barlamans chat, it's kind of the new version where all the cool kids hang out. It's a free app on your phone, or you can just download an app on your desktop, or you can just sign up in your browser. Go to discord.gg/the1ring, and you'll find our server. You can sign up, and there you go. So it feels like IRC. It's kind of like Slack meets IRC, where there's a bunch of different chat rooms. We have different rooms for The Hobbit, for Lord of the Rings, for gaming, for cosplay, and then one for Rings of Power, and then one for Rings of Power leaks, in case you really want to get spoiled about the latest
leaky pipes. Leaky pipes. You never know what's going to happen. And talking about leaky pipes, we're going to do that next Tuesday. We will leak like a leaky pipe next Tuesday with Green Dragon gossip. You guys, until then, we hope that you take care of one another, be safe and be sound, and just look out for one another. And here we are, a big special recognition to one of the best and brightest Tolkien fans in the world. My sister, Tiffany Broadway, has visited me here. Lots of love to you. I've got an audience tonight, an audience of one here. We're going to be arguing about the metaphysics of Middle-earth all night long, and that's what we love about these stories. It's the best. You guys are amazing. Until next week, we'll see you 5 p.m. Pacific time right here next Tuesday. Until then, good night and good luck. Or better yet, buenos noches y buena suerte. Bye, everybody. I can't believe John Howe and Alan Lee share a birthday like that so close.